Okay, sounds good. And then I'll just say hi to folks and yeah, perfect. Hi, everybody. As you're jumping in, it's nice to see some familiar faces. Glad to have you all with us. We're really stoked to have Kristina and Ian with us too from the Farmers Land Trust. There's quite a few folks who RSVP'd to be on this call, but it's hard to know how many folks will join us. So we'll just wait a couple minutes as folks are getting logged in here. And then the way this time is going to go is I'm going to do a quick presentation about Taproots to begin, and then we're going to turn it over to Kristina and Ian to learn more about the Farmers Land Trust and how this model might help those of us who are here in Idaho. So yeah, I want to have lots and lots of time for Ian and Kristina's presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just do a little bit with Taproots. To begin with, feel free if you want to throw into the chat where you're calling in from, or what your interest is in all of this. If you'd like, just introduce yourself to the group, or if you don't want to, you don't have to, but feel free if you want to. Okay, I'm going to try this out. We'll see how it goes. And maybe I can just get somebody to give me a heads up that they can see this screen.
Okay. Yes, we can see
it. All right, so let's see if we can turn we'll see. The next question is, does the forward move button work? So for those of you who I haven't gotten to meet yet, my name is Casey O'Leary. I'm the executive director of Taproots Farm Hub. I worked on starting this project with a group of other farmers because I myself am an urban farmer, or was an urban farmer for 18 years, and had a really hard time accessing long-term secure land in a very rapidly growing space. As all of you know, Idaho is incredibly popular right now. So I basically took a turn in my life and ended up being a college professor for the last 4 years, teaching urban agriculture classes at the College of Western Idaho. And during that time, I was running into the same thing with my students that I ran into with myself, which is that we can teach these people to be awesome farmers, but where are they going to go if they want to farm? What kind of land are they going to get onto? So it's very difficult to access long-term land that's affordable, especially when you're competing with developers for that. So, oh, I knew it was going to do this. It's not going to let me. Sorry, I have to, I know what's going on, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick. I'm going to start sharing it again, and it will work. Don't worry. We're going to get it here. Let's see here. Take off this. Take off this. Sorry, you guys. This is the Zoom stuff. You would think in 2026 we could have it together, but whatever. This. Okay. Here we go. Okay, you're gonna see a blank screen, and then you're gonna see something come on to it. And now it will move, I bet. Okay, so we're back. Okay, yes, good. Yes, okay. So just a little bit about Taproots and what we're trying to do. We're kind of calling ourselves an incubator farm commons. Incubator farms are quite common all around the country. There's a lot of really great examples that we're pulling from, but this would be the first one that we will see in Idaho when we get this one launched. But we're also calling it a commons because the typical incubator farm model is the idea that you bring farmers onto a piece of land, you train them on how to be good farmers, you give them a plot for a few years, and then they're expected to graduate from that incubator and move on and be able to buy land and whatever. And that is the main problem that we're all having, is that land is inaccessible. So instead, we would like to keep people on land and just hopefully keep reaching new landowners who are interested in this model, where we can keep people on for permanent periods of time or long-term periods of time. As you know, it's very difficult to invest in infrastructure or equipment or even perennial crops if you do not have long-term access to land. So You know, if we want asparagus, then we ought to figure this out. And also if we want berries, and if we want fruit, and if we want nuts and all of that. That's why we don't see any asparagus at our farmers markets, because nobody has freaking long-term access to land. So another problem we're trying to solve for beginning farmers is this idea that when you're very beginning, you need all this infrastructure, you need all this equipment, but you can't afford to buy it initially. So Taproots will have this stuff available. You can rent space in a walk-in cooler, or you can rent a tractor by the hour, and you can use those things instead of everyone having to buy their own $50,000 tractor and pay. We can share maintenance expenses for that. And then if people decide they want to use their own equipment or buy their own equipment, they can do that. And then they have gotten a chance to try out some things, and they know what they really like and what they want to buy for themselves. So that's another thing we're working on. We're working on shared market access. We've got some folks from City of Good on this call who we're working with on what kind of aggregation and what kinds of product can we help farmers sell if they don't want to just go and stand at the farmers market, every single individual. They can if they want to, but they don't have to. What kinds of new markets can we make happen in our local food system if we actually make aggregation real and possible and get this food into things like schools, hospitals, stuff like that, that we can't do alone, but we can do together. And then obviously we will be offering mentorship and training to beginning farmers. We will provide a new farmer intensive training program for folks who want to get into it but don't know how. So you'll spend a season learning about farming, but also about how to run a farm business, so the business side of things. And then from that point on, you'll have access to a mentor that is on the same site, which would be so cool. An experienced farmer who can just walk over and look at your stuff and figure out what's going on. And then, of course, the last thing is just that it's lonely and isolating sometimes to do this work as farmers. And so we want to make a space where people feel supported. Everybody, especially right now, and it's super hot and it's smoky and things are not going super well. Like, you know for a fact that there are farmers right now crying over their hoe in the field. And we don't want that to happen. Like, we want farmers to be like, oh, I'm having such a hard day. They can walk over to somebody else at the end of the day and be like, man, this day just kicked my butt. And would you like to have a beer? And someone else can say yes. And then you have that support. So that's what we're working on. Please forgive me. I used AI. Yes, it is horrible. Yes, it is sucking up farmland in our very area. There is no good excuse for this, except for I want us to have a visual of what this can look like. It's very helpful just to kind of show a picture of this, big piece of land where a bunch of different people are doing little parts of this: livestock, vegetable production, orchard production, food forest, whatever, shared access. And so what we're currently looking for right now is land, which is why we're talking to the Farmers Land Trust. So what for us at Taproots, what we're looking for is 40 to 200 acres, as close as we can get to Boise, but we're not delusional. Maybe it's going to be 45 minutes away from Boise, and that's fine. But Boise is where the most markets are right now, so that's what we're looking for. And it needs to have good water. So those three things are incredibly important. And then we're looking for ideally a 99-year lease, but we would not consider anything less than a 30-year lease for a lot of different reasons. There's a lot of extras we're looking for too, but that's the main thing: 40 to 200 acres, close to Boise, with good water and the potential for a long lease, or for us to be able to buy. If you want to learn more about Taproots and you don't know about us already, there's a little QR code. Our website is taprootsfarmhub.org. You can check us out, get on our little newsletter list. We'll keep you updated. But for now, I want to stop sharing and turn it over to Ian and Kristina to hear more about the Farmers Land Trust model and how we might be able to use this in our valley. I'm really excited about their model because I'm hopeful that what they have to offer is, we have all the components of what they're talking about. And so and many of the people who play a role in this are on this call right now. So I'm so excited to have you all with us. And yeah, thank you, Ian and Kristina, for talking with us.
Thank you, Casey. That was definitely my favorite introduction to a presentation ever that has ever happened. I definitely was scribbling down notes as you spoke about, if you want asparagus, we need farmers to have long-term access. That was so good. I love that so much. That's why you don't see asparagus at farmers markets. I never thought of that. Anyway, that was so great. Yeah. So we are very honored to get to be here with you all. We're very excited to get to share about the Farmers Land Trust with you all. And I guess overall, we are going to try to move quickly through this presentation because we understand that we want to make sure we leave enough time for questions and conversations. So we will dive in. So we are the Farmers Land Trust, and we work nationally around the country. We are a nonprofit land trust that is working to develop these farmland commons models, which we'll get more into. But really, we are focused on protecting land and also moving it into community ownership so that it can be utilized for active regenerative food production agriculture, and to be sure to give farmers like yourselves, like Casey described, hopefully not all of them are crying over their hose right now, but farmers long-term secure tenure on land, and we'll get more into that as we go. But first, just to share a little bit about us, my name is Kristina Villa, and I live in Middle Tennessee. My husband and I steward 70 acres of land, and we grow vegetables using organic and biodynamic methods and sell to restaurants, grocery stores, and other CSAs. We have about 25 head of cattle. We do raw milk and beef shares. And really, I come to this work as a young farmer who struggled with land security and land access and the power dynamics that very often are unfair, and also the lack of equity and all of the other issues we all know exist. But also at that same time, knowing and loving so many aging, retiring farmers who also were struggling with a lack of options and who were trying to figure out how they could pass their farm on in the most equitable way as well. So not just transitioning their farmland and not just protecting their farmland, but also transitioning and protecting everything else that they had built as far as community and markets and infrastructure. And really, how can we bridge that gap, and how can we utilize existing structures to go beyond and do more?
And I am Ian McSweeney. I live in southern New Hampshire with my family and I. Those are my two boys who are now teenagers. I've long focused on farmland conservation, farm ownership work, with the belief that land, farmers, stewards, ranchers, and community are equally needed to both bridge the transition of that and to think in a longer term, multi-generational perspective for farming. So I grew up in Massachusetts. I've lived really on either side of where many of you are. I lived in Oregon for some time, and then Montana for some time. Now live in southern New Hampshire. Years ago, when I was running a private foundation funding farmland conservation, farm ownership work, partnered with one of the first modern CSAs in the country, this Temple Wilton Farm. And that brought forward that how is community integral to this, and how is community invested, and how can community really bridge that gap of transition of land for broader community farmer sustainability and long-term viability. So grateful to be here, great to connect and share what we have to do.
And so really, there are the issues that Casey so greatly pointed out about those individual farmers who are struggling with land security and what that means to our food system. But when we zoom out, the crisis that we all feel on a personal level is so much bigger than ourselves, and is really deeply embedded in the society that we are struggling to move out of. So every single day, about 37 mid-sized farms are closing. Right now, the way that farmland is owned is incredibly unjust. About 98% of land is currently owned by white people, and that is an obvious unjust land access and ownership issue. Most farmers are over the age of 75, meaning that over 200 million acres are going to transition in this decade and next as those aging farmers retire. Farmland values are appreciating by over 40% per decade, meaning that they are incredibly out of reach for all but wealthy people who are usually not farmers. And so really I think we all know these things, but it's really important to set the stage of why this work is so important and so needed on a larger national scale, but also right there where you all are in Idaho.
So us, the Farmers Land Trust, we are a national 501c3 land trust, and really in our work are these kind of values focus areas named here. You know, we are focused on farmland ownership, farmland tenure, farmland equity. We're focused on the way farmland is used, both for active agriculture around regenerative, organic, biodynamic practices, and the way farmland is stewarded in an ecological way. We understand kind of the needs for security and equity and long-term tenure for many different farm enterprises, from for-profit to nonprofit, production to community level, the needs for kind of all those different legal structures and all those different farm types, and the reality that all of them have shared challenges around land, around capital. So that's our focus, is to address that land and capital transition. Next slide.
Oh gosh. Sorry. Okay.
So to start with, we just wanted to give a quick snapshot. This may be a review for some of you. It may be new for some of you, but really it's central to our work and the space we occupy. So we wanted to just introduce conservation land trusts. Next slide, please. And community land trusts a little bit. So conservation land trusts really are focused on natural resource, habitat, open space protection, acres of protection in many ways that separate at least some human uses from the land itself. And so conservation land trusts started in Massachusetts in the 1890s with trustees for reservations, and have kind of expanded out over the decades since then. Really, the late 1970s into early 1980s, there was a huge growth of conservation land trusts and conservation protected land as conservation easements came to be. Before that point of time, it was just ownership of land. After that point of time, conservation easements, like fractional rights from land, separated so they can no longer be used, like development extraction rights, came to be, and then were kind of enabled by state and then federal legislation. So conservation easements are a tool that many conservation land trusts use now to protect open space, habitat, acres of land, but also ownership is still used in some ways. Next slide.
And so the other type of typical land trust is this community land trust model that we'll just briefly go over. And the community land trust was first founded in 1969 in southern Georgia, and really was created by Black activists who knew that in order to have security over their food and also their housing, that they as a community needed to own that together. And so New Communities was the first community land trust, and it was focused on agriculture. And since then, the community land trust model has really evolved to focus mostly on the built environment and housing. And the typical model is that the community land trust owns the land in that hyper local community context. So whether it's within a town, a city, tri-city area, region within a state, but typically it's hyper local. That land is owned by the community land trust, and then individuals then lease that land and own the buildings and infrastructure on top of that land. So it's a way that individuals can own financial equity, but also that those resources in land access is kept as a community resource with caps on affordability. And really, when we think about the farmland commons model, it's really not something of the future or this thing that we are creating all of a sudden. It's really a way that land has been treated for a very long time, been held as a community resource, and been held as an asset to be used by all in the best way possible. And we're really just trying to take that and apply it to the legal structures and the paradigm that we live within today. And so that is how we have come to form a new kind of land trust, which is a commons land trust, that is understanding that all land has to be owned in some way. So how can we own it in the best sort of ways? And also existing within the paradigm that we live within today?
So within this farmland commons model, we have certain values, and so named our work and values as an organization up front, but then really these values are what shows up in the farmland commons work. So these and more are embedded into the bylaws, into the lease and management plan and the shared agreements, all these uh, incorporation documents and relational agreement documents that are required and are beneficial to create this shared entity, the farmland commons, have certain language. And what we do in our work is we create template documents that are available as an open source resource that includes language that really kind of highlights and ensures all of these things are showing up in real tangible ways in the action. And then those template documents are resources that we use as a starting point for creating any commons we do. So, understanding that everything should be localized to place, community, people, and land involved, but there's probably some common values and beliefs that we could all connect around, especially in such a polarized time. So, these things are common values that we believe that everyone should hold and that should carry forward through from one commons to the next. Next slide. And so for the farmland commons, it is a nonprofit 501c25 structure. And so it kind of believes that there's collaboration benefit between multiple organizations coming together. It believes in that kind of land, farmer, rancher, steward, and community components are equally important, as I said, and it balances relationships and legal structures and agreements, and always trying to balance those components as each is so important. And this structure and really any durable work without one of those isn't going to have the sustainability that it needs. So, a lot of this work involves a lot of legal agreements and documents. Many are open source resources available, but it's really to create a structure that is so needed to hold land in a longer term perspective. Next slide. And so the 501c25 that I just mentioned, it brings together 3 to 35 member organizations. So here it lists 501c3 member organizations. That's what we are creating these farmland commons with right now. According to IRS, there's 3 qualifying member organizations, 501c3s of any mission value work. So any entity that is an IRS recognized 501c3 is a qualified entity. Any unit of government, so like a state, county, town type entity, is a qualifying entity. And then any 401a, which is a profit share type financial entity. Those are the 3 types of qualifying entities. Right now, all we are using is a 501c3, but we're open to use all 3. It's just that's where we're at right now in our work. And according to IRS, it needs 3 to 35, and they can enter and exit over time. So as long as the structure maintains 3 or more and 35 or less member organizations, it exists and it's in compliance. But if one of those 501c3s 5 years out changes mission or goes away or decides to move in another direction, or a new county government or nonprofit 501c3 wants to join 5 years out, all that is possible. It's a flexible enter and exit organization. So that's really beneficial for the long-term durability. It's far more durable than any single 501c3 that if that fails, goes away, closes, that's the end of that 501c3, and its assets are dispersed according to its bylaws or the attorney general. This entity survives beyond the end of 1 or 2 of its members, so long as they're replaced or so long as there's 3 or more members in place. So it's, it requires more collaboration, but it creates far more durability as an entity. And then it's limited in scope, that it's only holding title to real estate. And then it's managing that as a kind of a landlord property holder. So taxes, insurance, general kind of upkeep, making sure those things are carried forward. But really all uses of that is by leaseholder. So it's conveying out a lease on the other side. Next slide. An alternative to the 501c25 that I just mentioned is a 501c2, which is very similar. It's a limited scope land holding structure I was just describing. The difference is that it only has one entity it's connected to. So one 501c3 could create a 501c2 entity, so it removes that collaborative structure to it, and it removes that durability benefit to it, but it is a more straightforward, efficient, simpler structure. Next slide.
And so after a farmland commons is being formed, created, then it has its own board of people. So each one of those member organizations that co-created this farmland common, they each get an equal number of seats on that board. And then it is its own entity with its own bylaws that has its own board of people. And then that board is only able to do what is listed on the right side of this slide. And so as shared, this is a limited scope land holding entity that according to IRS standards can only hold land and then essentially lease that land out. And so this board, we are focused on creating a board that has multiple different aspects of technical assistance and support for that land and that farmer, but also that are all community members of that shared food shed bioregion where that land is held. So nonprofit representatives from the organization, and then community members, technical assistance providers, and always within this model, the farmer, the steward, the rancher, whoever that leaseholder is, always has a seat on the board. And so this is getting into one of those equity items, which are not financial equity, but power, authority, decision-making equity, where the lessee in this situation is not just receiving a lease, but they are also part of creating the lease terms and part of the ownership structure itself. And then this board is responsible for making sure property taxes are paid, insurance is paid, collecting any lease revenue, and also within this model, no lease revenue goes up to the parent 501c3s. It's all reinvested back into the land and back into that farm ecosystem.
So land in the structure really, in a broader sense, this structure depends upon those member 501c3s to act as a fiscal sponsor in many ways. That might be a familiar term that many of you are aware of, but it's a fiscal sponsor for land and for charitable money coming into it. So land moves from private ownership into one of those 501c3 member organizations and then into the farmland commons. And then any charitable money would move the same way. And that is because the 501c25 is not a public charity. So those that are donating land or giving a discount sale on land or donating money or granting money in, the 501c25 does not, as a standalone entity, does not have the same status as a public charity in the way a 501c3 does. So those donating would not get the tax benefits in donating in. So money, or land and money flowing through the 501c3 into the farmland commons is the path of movement for those things. If a tax benefit is not needed, or land is already owned by a 501c3 or a municipality or a county or something that wouldn't need that tax benefit, it could flow directly into the 501c25, but that's, not the typical path in this model. Next slide. So, and once land sits in that 501c25 farmland commons, a long-term secure equitable lease is conveyed out. Ideally, it's a 99-year lease that operates like a ground lease in the way community land trusts use ground leases to separate ownership of buildings, infrastructure from the land itself. This way, farmer or farm organization is building equity and ownership in the things that they build, construct, add to the property. So they could own the house, they could own the barn, they could own different infrastructure. They don't have to. The nonprofit could build the house or take in the house with a donation of farm, or build the barn and then they own it and it's part of the lease. But really it's the balance of how to decommodify certain things like land that shouldn't be a market product that's extracted from and exploited, and allow farmers to build equity in things like their business and infrastructure and other assets. So it's always a balance, and each project's going to look different, but ideally a ground lease is beneficial, and ideally a 99-year lease that can be passed to the next generation, that can be sold with other farm assets at the end, but has a life beyond that of any one individual farmer or farm business is best. But state to state, that looks different. There's limitations on lease terms. There's limitations on things like a ground lease. So it really depends on the state. But overall, the leases, doing all these things on the right-hand column and more. So it's meant to be, really supportive of active agriculture, active stewardship, and those equity components and use components and transition of use, and meant to be far more adaptable than a conservation easement. So things like renewable energy, housing, infrastructure are all possible where they may not be on land that's already conserved with a conservation easement. Next slide.
Thank you. Yeah. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what makes this different than just having a nonprofit own the land. And the ways that this is different is that, one, the leaseholder is actually part of that ownership structure. So they are having voice and decision-making power instead of just getting a lease from a nonprofit. The board is then also all local majority members of that community. So if it is a national nonprofit, that board is still local to place, and the land is still owned local to place within that, as a state registered entity. And then this legal structure itself of the C25, or alternatively the C2, because it is that limited scope landholding entity, this entity is not legally allowed to be involved in the day-to-day decision making or operations of that farm business. And this is really what gives those leaseholders the independence and autonomy that all farmers want and need out of farmland ownership, but without the ability to sell the land in the future. And then, of course, the C25, with that added collaboration and support, then it now is open to multiple networks and audiences and resources that one 501c3 may not be by itself. And then that long-term sustainability and durability built within the legal structure, not just about our food system.
So, and for us, really, a lot of this is trying to, as I mentioned, kind of decommodify the land, to treat land differently, and to elevate the farmer, and to kind of treat the farmer differently than they are now. So it's a balance and tension in many ways in this structure, but it's, so a nonprofit owning the farm real estate is a way to decommodify and remove that financial barrier, but then how to give the farmer as much equity, autonomy, and control as needed to run a farm business and to operate, and not just be endlessly needing to come to a nonprofit board for decisions or approvals. So, some of that is baked into why we chose that 501c25 structure, that it's a limited scope. So it can't micromanage the farm business. It's leasing out for total use, and the stipulations on use are just within the lease and the management plan. So that 501c25 has barriers, but the other side is what's named here is really kind of what position, what rights, what benefits does the farmer get? And so the farmer sitting on the board of the structure, the farmer having a controlling vote in certain things in the board are really important to the structure for us. That secure, equitable lease that I mentioned that can be passed down is really important in this model. That, what you mentioned up front, in part of what you shared, Casey. Like farming can be challenging, lonely, heavy in so many ways. Like so, facilitating ways for farmers to connect with one another, um, and not just go to a board meeting that's going to talk about a variety of things, but really the only thing the board is doing is holding land that's leased out to farmers. So the board meeting can be a place where these leaseholding farmers can connect with one another and seed conversations and collaboration beyond that, and think about things like, you know, shared infrastructure, shared marketing, shared human resource side of things. Really, it's a kind of a structure to allow much greater connection, social connection, and much greater collaboration amongst farmers. Next slide.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and take the slide if that's okay. Okay. So the process to create this farmland commons model is kind of a long, winding road as depicted here. And it also is way more involved than depicted here, even though this is already a very busy illustration. We find that many communities and many farmland commons in development take a few steps this way, and then a few steps back, and then a few steps sideways, and a few steps forward, and all needed to really get on the same page, but also to build something that fits everyone's needs and also fits everyone's goals. And so those first steps around building a relationship is kind of a great way to start, is how we're doing here, of needing to learn about this idea and pull the different community members together. But really it requires those community members, those people willing to be on that board, the farmers who need that secure access and tenure, farmland, identified farm parcels, landowners who are willing and aligned to donate land in or give that land at a discounted sale. And then from there, moving on toward memorializing the agreements around those shared values, but also the bylaws for the organization. And then moving into that transaction and transfer phase where land is actually moved from private ownership into the farmland commons. And then those leases are developed and then given to those next generation farm stewards. And these take a lot of time. And I think one of the questions that we get asked all the time is, well, how long does this take? And that is such a hard question to answer, because maybe on the fastest side, from start to finish, we've seen 2 years. You know, you file things for IRS approval, and who knows how long that's going to take. When you bring multiple people together to go through even if we are starting from a template, to go through a legal document and all agree on changes, evolutions, edits. Some people want to read each line by line in a shared meeting. Others just want to read it on their own in their free time. And scheduling is difficult with groups of people. And so it takes the time it takes. And working in community definitely is a slower process than working by yourself. But you're also able to do so much bigger, greater things beyond yourself when you work in community. And I think that although this model is complex, it really adds so many layers of support and safety and equity to this farmland crisis that we're in, that it's completely worth it. And then that's not even to say what comes after this other end of the tunnel down here. Once you get through the transactions and transfers, then it's managing the farmland commons, which luckily is not as involved as creating it.
So, and really, this work for us was trying to be additive to the work that exists and trying to collaborate with many other organizations and many other focus areas within this. So it was seeing a need for something that was not being addressed around how farmland is owned and who has tenure and equity in that land. And it's understanding that conservation easements do a piece of, but not all of that, and other community and agriculture and food systems organizations and work is essential, but it needs land. So it, you know, this slide is just highlighting a few of the ways that other organizations and other movements, other focus areas can collaborate or connect in with this. So, you know, some farms that come into this model already have conservation easements on them. Conservation easements stay in place as they do. This is just a new owner of that land. Other farms, conservation easements are added after the fact, sometimes for a protection partner and or funding where available to, reinvest in the land itself. That farmland commons structure, as I said, between 3 and 35 member organizations, like other nonprofits can be added to that over time, or others can step away, as I said, like the leasehold or multiple leaseholders on the ground can be any type of legal structure, like whichever appropriate for the place. So, there could be a nonprofit and a for-profit, or a cooperative, or there could be a nonprofit that's like supporting multiple sublease holders on the ground that have different types of businesses. So it really is open to whatever legal structure, whatever type and scale of agriculture and agriculture business enterprises are appropriate and needed in that local community. Any of those could be leaseholders. And really that's, the farming is done by people, and people need houses, and people need other economic enterprises. So while we call it the farmland commons, that's one, a broad sense of what agriculture means, but two, that agriculture is the central point focus for us, but it's not the exclusive focus for us, that housing is part of it, that other, economic enterprises, buildings, infrastructure, food systems, education, other kind of community needs, really like any real estate that would be essential for the food system in that food shed could be held in a structure like this. Next slide.
And this is all open resource. And so as shared, all of the templates to create this farmland commons model are available on our website as fully open resource, and anyone anywhere can download them and use them and make them your own. In addition to being able to use the full model worth of templates, we also encourage and have seen people use just pieces of it that work or fit their needs for them. So for instance, if you are a landowner or a farmer who is needing to create a lease, then maybe starting with just the lease template is a great option for you, because it builds in more equity aspects, and also land care, and also a focus on ecological stewardship and shared investment. So you could use that lease template as a starting place for just a lease without having to build out the whole model. In addition to those templates being open source, we also have on our website available for anyone to look at the actual documents that are in use currently by farmland commons around the country. So you can see active leases that are in use. You can see active farm management plans. You can read organizational bylaws for some of these farmland commons. And I think that that is a really valuable offering as well, because it allows you to see how something gets started from a template, but then how a community evolves them to fit their needs all on their own, and how they apply to the state laws, which within the context that that farmland commons is operating within. So definitely encourage you all to go look at these, because they're so cool and so valuable.
And just to add one thing to this, and I guess this is a finer point, is that, right, not every landowner is going to be ready to make a decision. Not every landowner is going to be at a point of sale or donation or transition, but a lease can be an amazing starting point. That if, you could secure a 30 or 40-year lease with a landowner, I guarantee during that 30 or 40 years, they will have some life event. It could be their own passing, it could be something else, but I guarantee they'll have some life event that they will at some point be ready to sell, donate, transfer. And if you're already on the ground with a secure lease, like, you have this relationship that could lead to more than that.
Thank you. Yeah. And so wanted to share this farmland commons ecosystem map that tells a little bit about the different farmland commons projects that are far enough ahead to be public facing and sharing. And so these are moving towards states of incorporation. Some already have land moved into them. Some of them have land identified, and there are active fundraisers to acquire them. Most of them have nonprofit partners. They are all so different. And that's really the point that I hope is driven home by this map, is that they're all so different in the location that they are. So around and across the country, of course, but also geographically speaking, some of them are rural lands, some of them are urban lands, some of them are focused on individual farm families and individual farmers. Some of them are focused on farmer collectives, and there are market gardens, but also regenerative tree farms. There are different points of career in the farming cycle that are represented here. And with all of these examples being so incredibly diverse and unique, it's our hope that anyone anywhere can see themselves within one at least of these projects and be able to say, I can do that too. And so, yeah, thank you all so much. We're so grateful to get to share with you and share about the Farmers Land Trust and the Farmland Commons model. And excuse me, we would be so grateful for you to sign up for our newsletter. And if you go to our website right now, today is the first day that you can see our annual report, our very first one ever, reflecting our first 3 years. It's really beautiful. If I do say so myself, I feel like we did a great job. It's so fun and beautiful to look at. You'll be like, wow, this is a joy to read. And yeah, we are a nonprofit, so we'd be super grateful for a donation of any kind, just to be in solidarity with us, and connect with us on your favorite social media platform, because we're probably there, and would love to open this up for a discussion for the last 10 minutes. So thank you all.
So I can start us off question asking, and I'll just say that we've got there are, in addition to, there's a lot of people who signed up to be on this call who are not, but even on this call right now, we have a really powerhouse group. We've got academics, we've got attorneys, we've got nonprofit leaders, we've got farmers, we've got researchers, we've got funders. I mean, there's a lot of heavy hitters on this call. So I just want to acknowledge that this is a really great group to be having this conversation with. And let's see, I have just a Taproot specific question to get us kicked off, and then I think, we can just open it up. So in the model that Taproots has, we would be subleasing land to all these different individual farmers. So in your model, would every Taproots farmer have a seat on this Commons board, as well as the like if Taproots was the lessee of the land that the 501c3s were holding in community, would every Taproots farmer get a seat on that board?
So yeah, this is a question that comes up often too, and it could go so many different ways. I think, when we think about that, is one option, that each farmer would hold their own individual lease, and then each farmer, according to the model, would be on the board, except for no, because within the bylaws, there's also these affinity groups. And so if it ever came to be that there were too many farmer leaseholders to be all on the board, then there would be a affinity group, which the most aligned term I can think of would be like a subcommittee of farmers that then would elect who would be their representatives to join the actual board to be the farmer leaseholder representative. So that would be one way. What we would recommend instead of that would be that Taproots is the lessee, and they manage those individual farmers on the ground. And that way it's Taproots that's the lessee, and that is very often the farm incubator. It's better and easier for one organization that's already holding the relationships with those farmers on the ground to manage those relationships and those people, versus the Commons board having to manage all of those individual leases and relationships. So it could go multiple ways, but our leaning is that one organization is the lessee and then manages those relationships.
Perfect. Okay, thanks. That actually answered my other question too. So thank you.
And the bylaws lease I'm sorry, the bylaws template itself speaks to that affinity group language around that, and it also speaks to like the percent of the board that could be leaseholders as well. So it,
Okay.
that's just a template. It could be changed as needed, but it contemplates that you're describing.
Mm.
It also contemplates that same thing in the reality that these farmland commons are set up to hold multiple farm real estate parcels or food systems parcels over time. So then you're going to have multiple leaseholders, and at some point, just even if there's only a single leaseholder per farm property, it gets to be more leaseholders than could be on the board based on the size of the board and the cap on the percent of leaseholders. So it creates a mechanism for a voice and decision making in both of those scenarios.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank you. Okay, I'll turn it over to questions from everybody else at this point.
It looks like Carrie, would you like to go next?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
We can hear you. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm actually calling in from Canada, so some of the jurisdictions are going to be different, but curiosity from across the border in terms of land trusts for farmers. I'm calling from the traditional and unceded territories of the Stoneyx and Squamish First Nations. You mentioned about farmers building equity. Are there models? It could be a rhetorical question, but are there models on your website for how you see that? Like in a 100-year lease term, if a farmer is taking on a lease and then building infrastructure, barns, wash and pack, kind of holding, possibly even building a business, are there structures for how that is succeeded or how that equity could be extracted if the farmer then wants to move on to a different project?
Yeah, there aren't models on our website right now specifically, but in some of the projects we have are developing those. And I guess two answers to what you're getting at. One is that the farmer's business is their own business enterprise. So that's its own entity. Whatever they build in the business, value, equity, assets is theirs, and it's not co-owned, meshed with this structure, unless it's real estate or buildings infrastructure. So on the buildings infrastructure side, and the land, the real estate is always held in this common structure. So the buildings infrastructure side of things, like the management plan template on our website speaks to, like, it frames this as a topic, and that there'll be a method determined in the individual management plan to address this. So more specifically, you won't find these specifics, but they would be things like, an appraisal done at time of building of the barn, and then a depreciation schedule for that barn over time to determine a equity value X years out, or an appraisal done within X years of exiting the lease or selling that to determine the value. So, it's generally done by an appraisal, and then there's going to be adjustments to make sure it's affordable, to consider depreciation, to consider renovations, improvements to that'll have to be built into that structure.
I'll also just add one more thing, which is this generational equity in leases that we're currently working on with attorneys, is that the next generation, where it's an individual or family, that their children are going to inherit that lease, and like that ability to inherit that long-term secure access to land. I know we were talking about financial equity. It's just something that wasn't brought up in the presentation that I wanted to be sure gets mentioned. And I think we probably have time for about one more question. So Jessica, would love to hear from you. And I'm going to put our emails in the chat, and I want everyone to feel so free to send us emails, schedule another time to talk. And thank you again so much, Casey, for having us. Jessica?
Great, thanks. I'll be quick. I do really want to hear about all the challenges and the really awful, crunchy things that can happen when this all can also go sideways, but another time. What my other question is, trying to mobilize aging farmers in Idaho who have land, and that is their asset, asking farmers anywhere really to donate their land to this farmland commons, I think is a challenge. And so I'm really curious, like, what are some financial incentives? Like, what are some really creative ways in which you're seeing that real estate transfer happen that builds mutual benefit to farmers who have this land already and want to transfer it, who maybe even build equity for that farmer to make that transfer of land. Just because I see, the development dollars, like that is the incentive. And when we're looking at a healthcare system that sucks in this country and all of the things wrapped up into aging, I hesitate to see that the generosity part of just donation of land into these systems working for the rapid need anyway for the short term. So yeah, I want to hear about some creative ways.
Yeah, fully. And yeah, Carrie, we're envious of you in multiple ways, especially now in this country. But on one end, we don't think it's possible to compete with the real estate market and the development values. It's just there's not, even the most well-funded land trust, Jackson Hole Land Trust, it's somewhat close to you, is one of the most successful fundraising land trusts out there. Even they can't compete with the market value in Jackson Hole and the developer, dollars willing to buy land. So it's not something that can directly be competed with on the dollars. And so it does take aligned, willing landowners. But then it comes down to like, what is an equitable exit for those landowners? And if it's a purchase of some amount, like, is there fundraising capacity to raise the dollars? There's not public dollars available on the federal or state level. There's a few states that have had like pilot projects, but most of the public dollars you might be aware of collectively or individually are for conservation easement protection of farmland, but there's not for fee title ownership acquisition of farmland. So it's private foundations, individual donors, but it's what's the fundraising capacity to raise the money to buy out a landowner at an equitable price? Like, what do they need to fund their healthcare, their retirement, their exit? And for some, it's not at all connected to the market value, but there's a real number there to pay off debt, to afford living. So it's like finding those that there's a real number. They're not just looking for what the market will give them. Then the kind of creative piece that I'd name is like some of our projects we do is like, what's that farmer's goal, and how can we be kind of innovative and creative in solving that? And for many farmers, they don't want to leave the farm ever. They just can't farm anymore and they can't manage the land. So they would be happy and really want to live in the house until they pass away. Some farmers would want to be buried on the land, and so for some cases for us, it's like a life estate for the farmer to live in the house, a right for a family burial plot on the land. And that takes away a big part of the dollars needed, because now they don't have to leave and find a new house. Like, healthcare is still an issue, and like affording living is still an issue, but you can remove some of those real costs if they can stay in place. And that differs, like if it's close enough to other farmers could farm there without a house, or if there's possibility or existing two houses, so incoming farmer could have a house too. It's not going to work in every setting, but that creative component is how to pick apart the pieces of the farm in a way to allow the elder farmer to hold on to certain things for their lifetime, so they don't have to be bought out of those things and need money to buy a new one of those things, like a home to live in, and be flexible in that way. But it does, like, the filter for us is that aligned landowner who's can be patient and wait and give a donation, or only needs a certain amount to afford their exit, and there's fundraising capacity to raise that.
And I think very often, like, groups or individuals do think like, no one's ever going to want to donate a farm to us. No one's ever going to want to forego market value or do it. But that's just so not true. Like, firstly, people donate land all the time. Like, this idea around the culture of land donations, like people donate land to universities, to natural parks, to cities, to governments. What is not normal is that they're donating land for what we all say we value, which is food production, regenerative agriculture, community livelihood. Like, that cultural shift definitely needs to change. And how that will happen is them knowing that that's an option. So, like, putting together, as you have, like, the type of land you're looking for, what your vision is for it, like, is such a helpful thing. And really knowing that even though you're going to talk to 100, 200 landowners, and they're all going to say no, that one of them will say yes, and all you need is one to say yes. we have
That's
to
right.
go.
All you need is
But thank you
all you need is one. Yeah, that's a great thing to end on. All you need is one. Just to put it on everybody's radar, we are having a collaborative agriculture summit on September 28th here in Boise. I really hope that folks can join from wherever you are. It's going to be really, really fun. And a lot of the ideas that are presented here today will be very present at that summit in various forms. We're still deciding exactly what they look like, but we'd really, really like this conversation will remain up at that time. So please do, and if you want more information about how to get more involved with Taproots, if you don't already know, please reach out so that we can rope you into all the fun stuff we're doing right now. Thank you, Kristina and Ian, so much for your time. And thanks everybody else for your time as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you so
Casey.
much. Bye.
Have a great day.
Mhm.